On the evening of August 12, 1985, Japan Airlines Flight 123 embarked on what was supposed to be a routine domestic voyage from Tokyo's Haneda Airport to Osaka International Airport, about an hour to the southwest. Today we will share the story of this plane crash that shook the world and left an indelible mark on the history of aviation. The mighty Boeing 747SR carrying 509 passengers and 15 crew members took to the skies, blissfully unaware of the tragedy that awaited them. This particular flight was filled to the maximum capacity since many of the passengers were traveling to their hometown for the festival of Obon. 39-year-old Yukata Sasasi would be acting as the captain of this flight, being supervised by actual captain 49-year-old Masami Takahama, who had been flying the Boeing 747 for a decade now. 46-year-old Hiroshi Fukada was on board as the flight engineer. Unfortunately, the crew had never been trained for the catastrophic turns that they would have to face. For the first few minutes, everything was going as planned. As the plane gained altitude, the plane began to pressurize. In an airplane, the air pressure inside the cabin is higher than the pressure outside because the engines continuously bring in air. As the plane ascends higher, the air gets thinner, creating a greater difference in pressure between the inside and outside of the cabin. To handle this, the thin aluminum skin of the plane stretches slightly due to the air pushing against it. This aircraft, which has been flying for almost 11 years, had undergone this phenomenon thousands of times. But as the flight progressed, a series of events unfolded that would forever change the lives of those involved. The cabin pressure was being monitored by the flight engineer, but he was unaware of a critical flaw in the aircraft structure. The bulkhead is an umbrella-shaped structure at the back of a plane, which holds the pressurized air from the cabin. The bulkhead of this aircraft had been damaged due to a tail strike incident while landing in Osaka 7 years earlier. Despite extensive repairs, the bulkhead had not been repaired correctly. Over the course of these years, tiny cracks began to grow in the bulkhead because the air inside the cabin exerted pressure against it during every single flight. Now, as the plane cruised above the Pacific, these faults compromised the aircraft's rear pressure bulkhead, leading to an explosive decompression. The pressurized air inside the cabin forced itself out by creating a hole in the rear end of the plane, unleashing a violent explosion of air and metal and causing panic and confusion inside the cabin. The rudder on the tail fin, whose job is to stabilize the path, had been blown completely free of the plane. Everything that wasn't tethered was propelled out of the back of the plane, including ceiling panels in the rear cabin. The passengers clung to their seats as the deafening roar of the wind tore through the fuselage. Alarms were blaring in the cockpit, signaling that the air inside the aircraft was too thin to breathe, and the passengers struggled to attach their oxygen masks. But as the plane turned to the right to make an emergency landing in Tokyo, it started banking too steeply. The crew fought desperately against the forces of fate, battling to keep the stricken aircraft stabilized. But their efforts were in vain since the hydraulic lines that powered the flight controls had lost pressure after being severed by the initial explosion. This rendered the controls useless, leaving them at the mercy of gravity. The once proud Boeing 747 was transformed into a helpless creature, wounded and spiraling out of control. As the doomed plane hurled towards the earth, the passengers grappled with the horrifying reality of their predicament. The cabin echoed with prayers and whispered farewells. The aircraft began diving over 18,000 feet per minute, 10 times the normal rate of descent. The right wingtip and the engine were ripped off by the rugged mountainside of Gunma Prefecture, and the Boeing 747SR ignited into an enormous fireball after slamming into the mountainside at hundreds of kilometers per hour. Rescue operations took well over 12 hours to reach the site, and there were 4 survivors from the entire crew and passengers. Following this crash, Boeing redesigned the tail of the 747 so that rapid pressure spikes in the tailplane would not reach in such a catastrophic structural failure. They also added a fuse so that the loss of an aircraft tail would not result in the total depletion of all 4 hydraulic systems. And with that, we come to the end of this poignant tale. May we never forget the lives lost, and may their memory continue to inspire us to strive for greater safety in the skies.